I want to welcome everybody who's here in the gallery and is in our virtual room. I will share some thoughts very briefly just to welcome our distinguished guest today, the good Reverend Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. I want to just say that, as you all know, the Garrison Institute is a former Franciscan monastery that is located in Garrison, New York, that was retrofitted to be a beacon of hope and a container for contemplative wisdom, looking at the combination of kind of spiritual wisdom, but also contemplative science. And today we are graced with Dr. Michael R. Dyson's presence. For those of you who don't know, now you know, Dr. Dyson is an incredible, towering figure. When they say that we are standing in the shoulders of giants, I am standing on his. Incredible, prolific thinker, academic, author, and a shameless plug for his new show, One Question, One Mic. I will add the link to that a little later. He is someone who carries the oral tradition, not just through the Christian lineage, but in his genetic code, the manipulation, the wordsmithing, the combining of just incredible vocabulary and intellectual dexterity. I have read his work for almost a decade now, and I continue to be profoundly grateful for my professor, Dr. J.W. Wiley, for exposing me to Dr. Dyson. If you check out any of his 20 or so books, you're gonna get ready to be incredibly taken on a ride. Tonight, we will spend some time with him, really thinking about critical thought and contemplative wisdom. And I just want to invite Dr. Dyson in. Brother Dyson, how are you?
I had to unmute myself. I'm doing fine. Thank you, sir. Dr. Acosta, thank you so much for this tremendous opportunity to be here with you today, my friend.
Yes. I was sitting with a few of your texts. I had to dig into the crates to prepare for this occasion. And a new thought came to mind. I've been wrestling with your thinking for a while. And this first question and really inquiry I wanted to invite us in is to think about your legacy. Somehow, some way, as I was reading you, the spirit of Howard Thurman, came through. And I found it ironic that in the second to last chapter of A Long Time Coming, you actually you end that chapter with a quote of his. I'll just say this and allow you to respond. Thurman influenced King. And I just wanted to just acknowledge that something came to me that's the role that I think you play in this moment. And I just want to acknowledge you and thank you for the work and you just Thurman with more flow.
Wait a minute, I got to show you something.
Hey, oof, fire! I had to pull out this one. I have to pull out this one.
Meditation is that Meditation?
Yes.
Meditation of the Heart is a monster, brother.
Yes. So I wanted to start there. Wow. Just acknowledging you and your work and your legacy, and just something told me that's the kind of mantle that you're carrying.
Bless you, man. Well, what an incredible honor just to hang out with you, such a brilliant, insightful, and gifted young scholar and thinker and activist, and spiritually attuned and engaged figure in the world. But Howard Thurman is such a huge inspiration in my life. So what an honor you do to me to even draw me within the circumference of his incredible influence. He was the teacher of my teacher.
Mm,
Was the teacher of my pastor. My pastor, the
mm,
Reverend Dr. Frederick George Sampson the second,
mm-hmm,
who licensed and ordained me into the ministry. And Thurman was his professor, was
mm,
his teacher, because he graduated with a degree from Dr. Sampson did from Howard University.
mm-hmm.
And of course, Thurman was there. But I have been reading Thurman for decades, man, more than 3 decades, and have, him evoked as a pioneering figure whom I resemble in any way is quite remarkable. I mean, the stories about him, his quiet grace. I showed you the new biography of him, a definitive biography of him that I literally just picked up. So when
Mm,
you said that, right on my desk here, Against the Hounds of Hell, A Life of Howard Thurman, that's amazing.
mm,
Thurman said that we have to be careful not to reduce our dreams to the event, which is our immediate experience. This event that we confront, that is right before us, should not exhaust the infinite possibility of transformation that is endemic to our consciousness and imbued to us by a God, a spirit, a force of the universe that speaks through us,
mm,
that uses our lungs as God's own, that we must not reduce our dreams to the event we confront, because he said our slave foreparents
mm,
faced the rawhide whip of the overseer, the long rows of cotton in the heat, but they imagined a different future.
mm,
And so those words of Thurman continue to resonate with me. He said, either you're going to be a prisoner of the event you confront, or you're going to be a prisoner of hope.
mm,
And I've tried to choose to be a prisoner of hope, because in being a prisoner of hope, then we hold hostage the forces of anxiety and of disbelief that shear our souls and rob us of confidence,
mm,
the essential power of our destiny and our orientation to fulfillment of that destiny. So
mm,
Howard Thurman is
mm.
a big influence in my life.
Yeah, I had to start there. I had to start there because I was reading long time coming this morning, and I saw his quote in that second to last chapter, and I was like, there's
Yeah,
something here. And just his influence. I mean, the prisoner of hope,
man.
King was so close to
Oh my,
that conception. And
yes, sir.
April is a really significant month. We celebrate his assassination, at least think through and sit with his assassination. And
Right.
I recently, I could be wrong here, but I King learned about Gandhi's notion of nonviolence in seminary school at Boston. It may have been with Thurman.
I mean, Thurman was a huge influence on him. And then King went to a speech, I think in 48. So, even as he was graduating, he graduated in 19 from Morehouse because he had gone there at 15. So 48, I think he went to hear Mordecai Johnson.
Mm,
Great Mordecai Johnson, a great, stirring,
hmm
powerful orator who was also president of Howard University,
mm,
and who had gone to India
hmm
and met with Gandhi. So Howard Thurman and Mordecai Johnson were powerful figures. And Mordecai, in terms of bringing Gandhi to him, Mordecai, and we could throw in James Lawson, because even though he's around the same age, King acknowledged him as a superior tactician
mm,
and theorist of nonviolence. But when you think about Mordecai Johnson as the great preacher and lecturer that King heard that inspired him, the Little Brown Saint, I think Fisher's book on Gandhi,
hmm
and Howard Thurman bringing
mm,
that powerful meditative persona to bear, that led him to say, I'm as at home in an ashram as I am in a sanctuary. Negro Baptists were like, what? What he just what he say? What he just said? What he had said? So so he was a free thinker.
Mm,
I
mm,
mean, Howard Thurman was a free thinker. He was emancipated in his consciousness so that he was able to engage with a broad variety of human beings and human communities. So he certainly gave King a taste and a sense of ahimsa, soul force, satyagraha, the
mm,
laws of nonviolent resistance that didn't make you a passive
mhm,
figure, but an active one, though passive nonviolence, right, suggested that you weren't actively engaged in physical violence directed at a human being, but you were practicing a kind of moral jujitsu. You
mhm, mhm,
energy of your opponent,
mhm,
redistributing it against the force and velocity they bring in order to deliver a blow for freedom.
mhm,
um, King certainly was deeply and profoundly influenced by Thurman and carried in his valise, in his briefcase across the country, Thurman's book, Jesus and the Disinherited,
mhm,
where
mhm,
he talked about the social gospel basically. And the irony is, of course, is that as much as Thurman was an influence on King and figures like that who were involved with the social gospel, his own ministry was more priestly and meditative,
mhm, mhm,
reflective
mhm.
of the gospel and trying to come to grips with the moments of spiritual intensity and passion that allowed you to be a vehicle of the Most High. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thinking about that kind of moral jujitsu you mentioned, it's kind of like a social aikido of sorts. You mentioned satyagraha, and there's a lot of alignment in our conversation because that was exactly where I was going to go next. Acknowledging Thurman and King as a point of departure for this conversation, and
right.
connecting you in that lineage of those thinkers. And before I move to Satyagraha, I do want to acknowledge you in terms of in the Du Boisian tradition of a historical philosopher.
Wow.
So just want to acknowledge you there in terms of the work you do and embody. Um, so Satyagraha in the Gandhian tradition is framed often as a truth force, like a love force.
Right.
You were ordained at the age of 19. And the reason why I thought that you would be an incredible interlocutor to talk about critical thought and contemplative wisdom is because you've been moving from the hood in Detroit to all kinds of institutions, consistent, prophetic. So just for a moment, just reflect a little bit on your legacy and the fact that you've been not just spitting bars in the academy, but engaging in satyagraha and with that true force since a tender age.
God bless you for that. Yes, sir. I accepted my calling 18, 19 years old, and then got officially ordained to the ministry at 21, licensed and ordained. Went through, from 18 to 21 through a kind of 4-year process of, apprenticeship and reflection and thinking about the ministry under Dr. Sampson. And thank you for your kind words, by the way.
Mm,
But yes, sir, I've been trying to combine that soul force, ahimsa, that satyagraha, in terms of the passive resistance, which is far more active than people would think, and the quest for truth as the predicate of ministerial and engagement. And so, yes, it is extremely important and valuable to acknowledge one's spiritual roots.
mm,
And, I know that there's a real skepticism about spirituality versus religious doctrine, the charisma, the didache, the formalized context within the textuality of doctrinal belief, the literal scriptura, the
mm,
scripture, the writing, the inscription.
mm,
of, belief and faith and doctrine, the kind of codified theological distillation of religious principle,
mm,
defense of a spiritual life. And people think, well, a religious tradition versus being spiritual because it sounds loosey goosey and like you new age. But I think spirituality makes religion behave right.
mm, mm,
Religion from the word ligare, to bind together, religio, this
mm,
institutional infrastructure
mm,
and matrix that receives a crucible, even that receives spiritual impetus. That religion, as a formal institutional articulation, a theological expression as well of one's belief, that spirituality is a sense of being connected to the universe,
mm,
connected to others,
mm,
to God, however one conceives of God, however one thinks of God, and having that sense of what Dr. King talked about as cosmic companionship.
mm,
And so that spirituality is a web of affiliation, a loose garment of association that one is cloaked in,
mm,
allows one to reverberate in the intensity of fidelity to that spiritual truth,
mm,
not in a didactic or a narrow or a pedantic way, not in a kind of way that would cut off one's ever evolving consciousness
mm,
of the truth that is mediated through your engagement with others, and especially when that spiritual truth is off the beaten path. It's not on the formal theological track.
mhm,
Comes by, talking to folk on the street or speaking to somebody, in a gymnasium, or reading a piece of journalism that ostensibly has nothing to do with religion, God, or spirituality, and yet the truth speaks to you. So, in that sense, spirituality is very valuable and deeply and profoundly important.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I have two more questions before we. So I want to honor some of our fellows. If it were up to me, it'd just be you. But I want to make sure we engage fellows and we engage the audience.
Sure.
As I mentioned before, I had gone deep into one of your earlier texts. And I think it's important for people to understand as we talk about critical thought, and you're a bona fide philosopher, and that in that spirit, you you have a deep understanding of the specifically and beyond as well the Western canon. And so I just wanted to this notion of critical. We know that the notion of critical and critical thought and critical thinking and supported by Frankfurt School, but also the Enlightenment in terms of deposing monarchical rule. But I just think that you and the generation of scholars that really, including Dr. West, including Toni Morrison, including the Kobo Collective, including Black feminist thought, and I can just keep going and going of folks from the Black tradition who have provided a beautiful corrective and correction to critical thought. So just any thoughts around philosophy in this moment, its role, its practice?
Yes, sir. No, thank you for that. And it's a great honor to be in that number. You know, philosophy is critical. A lot of people grow up with the notion that philosophy is the foundational queen science, so to speak, the preoccupation that, when you get a PhD, what are you getting? A PhD in chemistry, a doctor of philosophy
Mm,
of chemistry,
mm,
PhD in religion, a doctor of the philosophy
mm,
of religion, a PhD in, theoretical physics, a doctor of philosophy.
mm,
So that philosophy is the arcade, the structure, the foundation, something would say. But then, you got philosophers in more pragmatic mode, people like Richard Rorty, who say, Descartes had a point, Immanuel Kant had a point, that the mind works in a certain way and that truth comes to us based upon objective criteria and so on and so forth. But people like Richard Rorty said, well, we got to challenge conceptions of truth. Truth is yielded in communities of inquiry and conversation, where the truth value of a statement is not necessarily a reference to a transcendent point that ranges beyond human history, that we depend upon human history to shape our consciousness and awareness of what the limits of knowledge are. Big word called epistemology, way in which knowledge operates, or how we think of ourselves as human beings, the being, a big word called ontology. So you got ontology in terms of being and epistemology in terms of knowledge, so that your knowledge of who you are is mediated through a different conception of philosophy. Rorty says there's nothing, like he's quoting Clifford Geertz, there's, when looking at interpretations, is there some deep essence that undergirds, the foundations of truth? And he said it's like standing on the back of a turtle, but it's turtles all the way down. It's the substance is generated in the context of your quest for knowledge and truth. So I've been influenced by folk like Rorty, because Rorty says reason is no longer a tribunal of pure reason, at least our conception of it, before which other disciplines must now genuflect and acknowledge it, stand before it at the altar of its supreme rationality. He said we have to adjudicate, we have to make decisions between competing claims, and that reason helps us do that, but that there's no such thing as getting down to the essence of a particular truth that is transcending human cognition, because we got to figure it out on our own. We got to figure out what the limits are and how we thinking about truth and so on. And of course, you can imagine that runs, contrary to many people's religious value. But what I found helpful is that, some of these people who believe in that transcendental or transcendent religious value are some of the same people, white evangelicals in particular, who try to justify and ground their conception that I think is deeply and profoundly influenced by time and space and by culture and by politics, but they think it's from God and I think it's from garbage. They think it's from God and I think it's from white supremacy. They think it's from God and I think it's from the surrounding culture, the patriarchy, the sexism, the homophobia. I think it's derived from the specific atmosphere, what the Germans would call Weltanschauung, the worldview. And they trying to make it transcendent and make it look like God is co-signing their bigotry. And so this is why I side with the pragmatist conception of ontology and epistemology, knowledge and being, because I think it's extremely important to say, let's ground what they think in a philosophical worldview that says that they are deriving these particular viewpoints and beliefs from specific moments of historically mediated culture that philosophy helps us understand, not a transcendental philosophy of a Kantian sense or a Cartesian epistemology, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. No, it's also, right, about, and Rorty goes at that Cartesian conception of epistemology, the mind is a glassy essence. He said it's about language and what we say and what we think and the knowledge we generate, what we agree upon in a pragmatic sense, right? And so that's extremely helpful to me when I think about some of these people who are trying to pass off their bigotry as epistemology and their hatred as science and ontology, because at the end of the day, we have to understand the philosophical and the historical context and origin and genealogy, both in the Nietzschean sense and the Foucaultian sense, that is the development of an ideal over space and time, and how we can track its evolution in specific cultural and intellectual fashion, that when you put all that stuff together, it's extremely important to use philosophy And Rorty said, look, it ain't no difference in philosophy and social theory or philosophy and literary theory, because
Mm,
it doesn't come with a set, range of knowledge that can be bequeathed to you as a result of studying its language for the mysteries. He said, nope, it's out there. You got to generate it and so on. So I say all that to say, I take that seriously when I come up against some of these people who be
mhm,
trying, put the okie doke on me and try to make me believe that God and philosophy itself are mediating and bringing us conceptions that would have Black people doubt themselves or
mm,
believe that we're second class citizens or women too, or gay and lesbian and transgender bisexual people too, or trans people. No. So that's why philosophy is extremely important as a
mhm.
tool of analysis, not as a cudgel to beat people over the head, but as a tool of analysis to think deeper and more profoundly about the world in which we live.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much for that. That was a philosophy 101 in
Sure.
3 minutes. Just before I transition to invite some of the fellows, so if any fellows out there, I'm gonna call on you in a moment just to be able to share some space with Dr. Dyson. It's important for me to acknowledge your contributions to hip hop culture.
Mm,
I think that, and especially in this institution as the Garrison Institute, it's important that people get blessed and understand the gift of hip hop. Um, and you have documented, I mean, I remember reading In Search of Tupac. I mean, I have the Jay-Z joint here.
yeah.
Um, so just wanted to, at least my little engagement with you here, just connecting with you on the hip hop tip. And, we just had DMX transition. May he rest in peace and all that he kind of represented, and many other folks, many of whom you've written about. And I'm excited to see who you will write about. But I'm kind of collapsing this question and thought, collapsing two things. One, the role of hip hop in making sense of catastrophe,
Mm,
and this moment where we wrestle with George Floyd's case and Dante Wright's murder and King's assassination in April. So there's just so much in April, a year after George Floyd's murder. So it's just wanted to leave there in terms of this engagement with you before we transition to fellows. But any thoughts? Any thoughts there?
wow, that's so provocative and suggestive, man. Dear Lord, DMX, man. I mean, just phenomenal. I saw him at the I think it was the I want to say one of the Source Awards back in the day.
Mm,
That might have been the Hip Hop Awards. I think it was the BET Hip Hop Awards, but where he performed. And what an incredible performer. The deep and profound spirituality, the Christian identity, the way in which he grappled with so much trauma and hurt and pain from his childhood and trying to grapple with the extraordinary, you know, possibilities that were his as a result of the miraculous intervention of the spirit, and yet acknowledging the pain, the heartbreak, the addiction, the demons that he struggled with. And to speak about death, King's death, DMX's death, we can throw in Nipsey Hussle
hmm
in that same period, Tupac, Somebody Wake Me, I'm Dreaming. I started as a seed, the semen,
mm,
swimming upstream, planted in the womb while screaming.
mm,
On the top was my pops,
mm,
my mama hollering, stop,
mm,
from a single drop. This is what they got?
mm,
Not to disrespect my people, but my papa was a loser. Only plan he had for mama was to blanker and abuser.
mm,
Even as a seed, I could see his plan for me stranded on welfare, another broken family.
mm.
DMX's childhood trauma, Tupac's witnessing the sexual violence and assault of his mother against his father in imagination from a single drop. This is what they got?
Mm.
The product of heated passion. Or Jay-Z, you know, now all my teachers couldn't reach me and my mama couldn't beat me hard enough to match the pain of my pop not seeing me. So with that disdain in my membrane, got on my pimp game, blanked the world, my defense came. So even though that's not about death, it is about the death of a certain hope, the death of a certain recognition that one is of value, that dies because the absence of your father led you to think far more negatively about yourself, and the pain and hurt that you endured as a result of his absence led you down a pathway of hurt and misbehavior. And so, yeah, when you think about all of those tremendous figures and you think about the extraordinary capacity of those artists, those hip hop artists, to make us think.
Mm-hmm.
Think about Nas. It's only right that I was born to use mics, and the stuff that I write, it's even tougher than dice. I'm taking rapping to a new plateau through rap slow. My rhyming is a vitamin held without a capsule. A smooth criminal on beat breaks. Never put me in your box if your stuff eats tapes. It's back when they were playing tapes. These young people don't know nothing about no tapes.
They don't know.
Tapes, my God, tapes. Right. Y'all downloading and streaming. Sometimes I wonder if that's a good thing because we have to listen to the, I mean, you know, you got to speed it up. And if you don't want to have to speed it up, you got to listen to the whole album. Let me see it as a piece. Let me see it as a holistic, artistic, and aesthetic articulation that expresses a valuable intervention in the name of redeemed or troubled consciousness, in the name of trying to grapple as a human being with the hurt and trauma that we all have to address. And so, you know, when I think about hip hop and all that it has meant from the figures you've spoken about, a Tupac, a Jay, a Nas, a Biggie.
Mm-hmm.
I used to fuss when the landlord dissed us. No heat. Wondered why Christmas missed us. Birthdays was the worst days. Now we sip champagne when we're thirsty. Darn right I like the life I live because I went from negative to positive, and it's all good. And if you don't know, now you know. That epistemic authority linked to transform circumstance through rhetorical manipulation toward the point of a valuable engagement in self-knowledge as a means of rhetorical invention. So, yeah, I think that there's a lot going on with hip hop. But there's some of this mumble rap, I can't understand what the hell he's doing. Let's farm some crimes, I will sit down. It's time outside. You know what I'm saying? What outside. And then go, know what I'm saying? No, dog. Really, I kind of really don't. But at the same time, maybe they're mumble rapping because when they were clear and articulate, they were still killed on the streets. When they were articulate and concise, standing by the speaker, suddenly I had a fever. Was it me or either summer madness? Because I just can't stand around. So I get closer, and the closer I get, the better it sounds. My mind starts to activate. Rhymes collaborate. Because when I heard the beat, I just had to make something from the top of my head. So I fell into the groove of the wax, and I said, how can I move the crowd? First of all, Rakim said, no mistakes allowed. Now that ain't the baby, a little baby, a yo baby, a mama's baby, a baby daddy. There's a lot of babies out here. And I'm just having fun. The only part I just said, walk it like you talk it. Hey! So, but that's all right. There's something valuable about each generation and each iteration of hip hop culture, and the degree to which it is able to negotiate its identity and
Mm,
truths through the set of circumstances it inherits, and by grappling with the resources that it has been bequeathed as a result of its own study or an older generation trying to nurture and mentor it.
mm. Thank you for that, brother. I want to just sit with that, and want to invite any of the fellows. Any of the fellows have a question? Sister Zara, Justin, our fellowship program has 11 wonderful people. Any of the fellows have a thought, a question before we open it up to the general public? You can feel free to raise your hand. And yes, Zara, Sister Zara, please unmute yourself. Dr. King. Dr.
That's what it is.
Yes, yes.
Dr. Dyson, as a former Black Studies undergraduate and African American Studies master's student, I'm just really quaking inside right now, because it's not that often that you get to directly connect with a figure that you have been studying for well over a decade, as Dr. Acosta said. So it is my honor, it is my joy, my pleasure.
This is sister.
I'm just gonna take a moment because you got me so hyped when you was like dropping those verses. I was like, this is what we need.
Where did you study undergraduate and graduate school? Where were you studying?
I was at Pitzer College,
Yeah,
and I was studying linguistics and Black Studies. Then I went to UCLA.
Okay.
And I was in there. I was in African American Studies, but it was not a full department,
Right.
because the university did not decree that it was worthy of such.
Right.
And it didn't become so until 2018.
Right.
And then I moved from there to education and neuroscience. And now I am a neuroscientist who studies the relationship between social justice and mindfulness.
Wow.
And embodiment and education.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
And so part of what I have been grappling with in this moment is I'm currently the co-director with Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams and Dr. Ray Johnson of the inaugural Embodied Social Justice Certificate Program. It's the first of its kind.
Mm-hmm.
And we are really attempting to create a space of conversation and engagement. And Dr. Acosta is a co-faculty with me in this. We're going to be teaching a course on embodied leadership together.
Beautiful.
And we are attempting to really bridge the gap between this space of somatics and healing. What does it mean to literally be the embodiment of healing within circles of activism and justice?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So I'm attempting to redefine justice in this moment. And one of the ways in which I'm angling at that is by saying that justice, I propose, perhaps, justice is loving awareness in action. Justice might be loving awareness in action.
That's powerful. That's powerful. That is, just briefly, in 1992, in an essay on Martin Luther King Jr. and the Black church and theology, I wrote the line, justice is what love sounds like when it speaks in public. So I think we vibing on the same.
That's right. We're on the same wavelength.
I'm with the other Dr. King.
Oh my goodness, I've been waiting for somebody to say that for a while. I'm like, y'all notice? Y'all notice? No, that's like a vast mantle and an honor that you would say so. But part of the reason why I'm attempting this reframing is that I have this framework that I call the science of social justice.
Mm.
And within that, I propose that social justice and well-being are one and the same thing.
Mm. That's powerful.
And part of the reason why I proposed that was because 2 reasons. I am currently bearing witness to so much violence, as we all are, and the violence comes from white supremacists, capitalists, patriarchy, but I see the ways in which it is being internalized and reflected within our movement for social justice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And those of us who claim that we are for justice are oftentimes turning against one another.
Mm.
And we are, in some cases, enacting, practicing, embodying, replicating the same violence of oppression, which we have been metabolizing for centuries. We are internalizing it and we are projecting it upon one another in the movement for justice.
Mm.
And yet claiming that this is still justice.
Right.
So there's a fundamental issue of awareness here that I see, and I'm just wondering if you have anything to speak to in terms of this. I mean, I'm sure you have treasure troves to speak to, but like specifically, how might you conceptualize around potentially social justice and well-being?
Mm.
Physical, mental, spiritual, holistically being the same thing, because if that is the case, then there's no room for violence.
Amen. I mean, that's so well put, so brilliantly expressed. I mean, having the brilliant Dr. Acosta on here to lead me through the paces and the cadence of conversation has been exquisite. And then to have this opportunity with the other Dr. King, the younger Dr. King, to be able to reflect on a very powerful philosophical and theological argument about the way in which, as Paul Tournier would speak about the relationship between spirituality and soma, somatic, right? Think about, in your terms, spiritual somatic. So the soma, the body, the somatic manifestation of spiritual intent at the level of the epidermis and the organism is the articulation of the universe's grappling with its self-consciousness at the moment of your particular arising. So that your consciousness convenes a colloquy of voices to grapple with the intent and anatomy of your destiny. Your intent is, that is the goal that you have in mind, and the anatomy, what does it look like? What road do I travel? What is the specific outline that will take?
That's right.
And so justice as well-being, spiritual healthiness, you have the first obligation to self, to keep your body and mind and spirit in such order that you become a vehicle to articulate broader principles of knowledge, truth, justice, wisdom, but especially love, caritas, charity, as the moment of self-recognition that you become a divine vehicle for an edifying conception of yourself. That's why if you acknowledge the gift God gave you, it ain't bragging. It's acknowledgement that you ain't had nothing to do with it. You didn't have its origin in mind. You are the mere highway through which the vehicle travels. You are the manifestation of that divine intentionality that allows spirit to engulf you, not to mysteriously disappear your engagement with the world, but to make it fuller. And so justice in terms of that awareness, love in terms of that awareness is critical. People often dismiss it. You know, the bipolar juxtaposition between thought and praxis, right? As if theoretical conceptions on the one hand versus a kind of practical engagement. One should inform the other. Without the other, it is not as full. A plenum, the plenitude of its possibility is eviscerated and emptied out as a result of the failure to grapple with it all the way. And grappling with it all the way means you got to understand the spirit of action and the action of spirit, the spirit of thought, the thought of engagement, and the engagement of reflection. Having said all that, I think your point is so powerful in terms of the awareness. The first justice is self-justice. Gandhi said, "Oh no, my brothers and sisters, oh no, my dear ones, if I don't take care of myself, I can't take care of you. If I don't address my own body, my own involvement, my own exhaustion." This is the genius of Black Lives Matter. This is where the Gandhian moment meets with the kind of Black Lives Matter, you know, encouragement for that kind of self-awareness. Now, we all know that they can have malignant narcissism.
That's right. That's right.
We all know you can start tripping out and doing stuff for the very sake of the extension of an egocentric conception of the universe where it revolves around you. But that's different than saying I'm taking care of me, because if I take care of me, then I can become a more superb vessel of the Almighty and the On High in order to express my ideal goals and aspirations. So for me, that's why justice is so important as a conception of public love, because the publicity of it suggests that you are held to account and in tension with your interiorized, privatized conception of what truth might be. You're forced instead to apply it to the world in which we live, right? Jesus can be the water of the world, but what that got to do with people who can't pay their water bill? Jesus can be the light of the world.
Right.
What does that have to do with the fact that people's lights are getting cut off every day? So don't spiritualize. As the great preacher Ernest T. Campbell says, we must not retreat into the womb of an ahistorical piety.
That's right.
Right? But instead, we must engage the world in fullness, as you've suggested, with that transformed and redeemed awareness, which is the manifestation of love, because self-justice, justice for the world, is premised in part, is predicated in large measure on doing the right thing to the self. Because if you love yourself, then you can love others. When people say, don't do nothing for me that you wouldn't do for yourself. No, dog, because sometimes I see some of y'all treating yourself real bad. Don't treat you like you treat yourself now.
Right. Like when RuPaul says, if you can't love yourself, how in the hell are you going to love anybody else?
There it is, the RuPaul theology, the correct.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dyson. Thank you so much. And if I might be able to quote you from this session as I'm writing my book, The Science of Social Justice, I would be most honored. That's the last thing I would love to say.
Me, you, and Dr. Acosta, we tied. He'll have my number. I'll tell him to give it to you. Ask him to give it to you. I'm sorry, and then let's share, and then let's
That's
love
what's up. So many blessings. Thank you so much.
Let's honor. Thank you for that, Zara. You'll stay there. Justin, come in, Justin. Justin. We want to honor Dr. Dyson's time, but I want you to ask the last question before he has transition, and we'll have a conversation with the audience. But
I will ask a very concise question. So And thank you so much, Dr. Dyson. This has been absolutely phenomenal. I've been screaming. I have popcorn here. I've been throwing it at the screen. I've been having a great time with you over here. And so,
okay, some red pepper sauce on there with that popcorn.
It's popcorn, so not with the red sauce.
That Lowry salt.
So here's my question. I've been exploring a lot, and it kind of ties back to the beginning of our conversation as it relates to this concept of philosophy and understanding what is truth, right? With a capital T. And I've been exploring a lot the difference between what some people may call assertions and assessments. Assessments being the stories that we create based off of the assertions that are actually facts or that are truthful. And the fact that we end up building our lives on top of assessments on assessments on assessments on assessments and on assessments. And then we end up wondering why we're standing on the opposite side of the room from one another, confused about what the truth is anymore. And so as you talked about philosophy and perspective and not being able to know, for example, what is truth depending on the perspective it's coming from, I'm just curious how that fits into how you might see us being able to come, and us being the world right now and these opposite divides, being able to come together even though we have such different assessments or definitions on what we believe is actually true about the world and about what's happening in the world. And
that's a great point. And I want to say, I'm going to text my people, and the next thing I want to say, if I can stay to 7:15, I don't want to impose on.
We'd love.
Not imposing on that.
We'd love to have you. We'd love to have
you. Impose, but Dr. Acosta's already my mace boom.
Yo, we'd love to. No, yes, please stay.
Williams, So look, sometimes you ain't gonna have no unity, Doc. It ain't gonna happen. How am I gonna reconcile with the KKK? It ain't gonna happen. I'm not getting down with the Proud Boys. It won't happen. I talk to people across the aisle. I've got a book coming out in November where I'm one of the and it's called Entertaining Race. Performing blackness in America. So I want to join the Jay-Z's and the Beyoncé's with the preaching and stuff. Don't be shortchanging us now. We be doing it too. We got rhetorical legerdemain. We engage in Kenneth Burkean conceptions of rhetorical inventiveness that need to be acknowledged. We got the Freddie Hayneses and the Prathia Hall Winds and the Martin Luther King Jr.'s. There's something deep and profound about, the capacity when I hear a Dr. Angel Acosta come on and seamlessly fuse a historic legacy of genealogical traditions in a Nietzschean and Foucaultian sense with a kind of Thurmanian epigrammatic conception of what truth is like when it's broken down, and Dr. King with her kind of, Thurmanian rearticulation of truth and knowledge with a Paul Tournier kind of conception of the relationship between soma and spiritus. And then Dr. Williams speaking about the way in which transcendental theories of truth, my ways are not your ways, my thoughts are not your thoughts, and yet stuck within the penumbra, within the shadowed existence we live out on earth in pursuit of truth, and yet the multiplicity, the Tower of Babel, that has unleashed multiple linguistic options, right? Then we go, well, what the heck we gonna do? Unity is the bridge. Justice is the destination. All right? So we don't worship the Edmund Pettus Bridge. We talk about John Lewis, who went across it.
That's right.
And Amelia Boynton, who went across it. So while unity can be a necessary predicate for the engagement in spiritual stasis, we want to be able, stability, we want to be able to talk and love each other and not hate each other. And even if we disagree, to talk. But sometimes, in the words of the historian of science, right, there are incommensurable vocabularies. We just ain't gonna get along like that, dog. It ain't gonna happen, right? Thomas Kuhn, K-U-H-N, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, 2nd edition, where he talks about you got a paradigm But if you're broke, Negro, you got a pair of nickels. But you got a paradigm, and a paradigm in a Dysonian interpolation is your theory about how the world operates, right? Newton had a conception, Einstein comes along, space-time continuum begins to challenge a gravitational pull. Not that gravity ain't real, but it's in a far more sophisticated universe of thought and possibility. So now you got a paradigm that is a theory about how the world operates, but then you start getting disconfirming evidence. Blink. Blink. What I thought was the case ain't the case. And Kuhn says the accumulation of enough disconfirming evidence, like, no, that ain't true. Like they got Chauvin on trial and they're trying to say he died from heart disease and drugs, but then we get the disconfirming evidence because we got, real experts going, no, it ain't got nothing to do with that. Correlation is not causation, homie. So get your theoretical predicate right before you assert a conditional fact that rides upon a distorted interpretation. So now you got disconfirming evidence. He says you got a crisis on your hands. And when you got a crisis on your hands, why do you have a crisis? Because the theory I had ain't working no more. Gay people are not loved by God. And then you come along and the gay person that you thought wasn't loved by God shows you some mercy from God, God's self. And wasn't nobody but on high that blessed you and it was in a gay body. Oh, now my theory about gay people has to undergo change. Now the paradigm has to collapse. And so paradigm, a theory about how the world operates, disconfirming evidence that challenges it. And when enough of that disconfirming evidence accumulates, you got a crisis on your hand. And what happens? He says you got to have a paradigm shift. And so the shift in paradigmatic expression is what we're aiming at here. So we need togetherness. We need unity. We need love. But at the end of the day, I done made up my mind. 62 years old, there's some people I ain't going to get down with. We ain't going to never get down. We ain't gonna never come to an understanding. I used to do this radio show, and I would have Negroes calling in, and they be talking about, yeah, black people need to come together. We need to come together, dog. I mean, why can't we all get together? I said, well, is there room for the gay people? Nah, Dr. Dyson. Now, wait a minute, Negro. You just said togetherness. Now, how come the gay people can't be involved? How come the poor black folk can't be there? How come the uneducated, the so-called illiterate? Right. Either you're going to have unity, which presupposes bringing together a broad variety and dimension of difference in order for us to create the opportunity to, in solidarity, move forward, or you got to acknowledge everything ain't for everybody. Everything ain't for everybody. And at the end of the day, I would rather get down with a person who says they are an atheist. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in the almighty motion, but they say, I love human beings and I want to sacrifice my life in order that the justice of the world would prevail. I'm down with that person more than woke up this morning with my mind, but then hate everybody I love. Can't stand for justice to be distributed, have a very conservative conception in the most narrow right-wing fashion of how the world should operate, and believes that God punishes human beings to the extent that they believe the Almighty co-signs their bigotry. So I'm supposed to get down with a white supremacist who happens to be a believer in God because we happen to both be Christian, than an atheist who claims not to know God, and yet I believe in their life as the manifestation of divine principles of redemption and transformation. Sorry, bro. The question ain't whether you are an atheist and you don't believe in God. The question is God an atheist on you? Does God in you? Does God, I am tired of your ceremonies and your incense filling my nostrils in the Hebrew Bible. So God don't believe in you. I'm tired of that, dog. I ain't with it no more. The question ain't whether you believe in God, is whether God believes in you. And so for me, I believe, to answer your question in the shortest way possible, is that at the end of the day, we got to have a paradigm shift. We got to have a theological rebirth, what Dr. King called, the other Dr. King, not this Dr. King, a revolution of values, so that we can begin to transform ourselves and the world in which we exist in a discernible fashion that allows us to redesign our destiny with as great a swath of human characteristics as possible, a greater swath of human community as possible, with as much love and consideration for the other as possible.
Thank you so much for that. I want to have one more fellow enter this space. Barnaby, let's pin Barnaby. So Dr. Dyson, this is one of our another one of our fellows, Barnaby. Barnaby, any thoughts, any questions, any comments?
I thank you, Dr. Dyson. I feel like I've just been blown away by a gale force hurricane of love. So and Dr. King and Justin and Dr. Acosta, from all of you too. So just thank you, and to this community for hosting this just expansive conversation. This question is too big for the short amount of time we have. And in a way, you previewed the response to my question and what you just shared, Dr. Dyson. But I feel like, or what I've learned is that in our Western culture, it is maybe one of the few or the only that philosophy and religion have been segregated, pulled apart. And so now we have this culture where science, in a sense, is our religion, not guided by a philosophy of theology of love. And so in this world in which we are so driven by science, how do we have this paradigm shift in which science is informed to have a new paradigm, like in the way Dr. King is working to revolutionize neuroscience, or like Dr. Acosta is doing in education? Are there any insights you can provide about how science can listen to or be informed by the divine in a way that it can understand?
Yes, sir. Let me look this quote up right quick. Hold on for 1 second, because what you have raised here is extremely important. And I want to read this from a man of faith and a man of science, so you can hear what he said. Let me see if I can get this quote right. So, this man, let me hold on. Let me get it right. Y'all give me 1 second here. I want to get this right. I know we can take the silence for 1 second. It's good to be hold on.
Take your time.
Discovered, because I want to get this right. And I'm typing too fast. Discover, there it is. Okay. Discovered. All right, here we go. So let me see if I can discover this thing, because I got it on the wrong. Here it is, right here. Here it is. So someday, after mastering the winds, the waves, the tides, and gravity, we're dealing with the science there, we shall harness for God the energies of love, and then, for a second time in the history of the world, man, human beings, will have discovered fire. Now, that's from Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. As you know, was in on the discovery of the Peking man,
Mm.
a paleontologist and scientist and priest, right? Read his magisterial book. If you're talking about Thurman, go read Hymn of the Universe,
Mm.
right? Hymn of the Universe. Read that by Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. He had more scientifically rigorous books, but that meditation, that beautiful synthesis of science and of faith, of soul and science, of passion and principle is extremely important. In fact, when I mentioned Einstein earlier, I think I did. I think I did.
Mhm.
Einstein understood, even though when Einstein said, I don't believe God plays dice with the universe. Now, Einstein ain't talking about God the way we might be talking about God, right? Because Einstein was a well-known atheist. He's speaking about God as the foundation of existence, God as the principle of all creation, right? That God as the architectonic structure of the universe. God in the same way that Thomas Jefferson might have thought about God, right? What did Thomas Jefferson do? The first thing Thomas Jefferson did when he came up with he done wrote what, 26 volumes of theology? The first thing he said, we're going to do in my Bible, we cutting out all the miracles. Oops. All the stuff that ain't empirically verifiable got to go, dog. That's it. Boom. Bye. See ya. So when we say, well, this is a Christian nation, in what sense? No, it ain't. The founding fathers, many of them who were religious, were mechanistic deists.
Mm.
God winds the world up and lets it go and operate according to its what? Internal dimensions of natural law.
Mm.
So there's no personal intervention in historic phenomenon by a divine persona.
Mm.
It is the universe as law. That's what Einstein was saying. Einstein was arguing with Heisenberg, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was arguing with him he said, because, Einstein was looking for a unified field theory for the last 26 years of his life. And Heisenberg came up with what? Quantum mechanics. No, we can't really specify where the phenomena are.
Mm.
And Einstein said, we got to get more specific than that, bruh. So they argue, no, you talking about subatomic quarks and black holes and whatever. No, we got to get real particular and specific because God doesn't play dice with the universe. That's where that came, right?
Mm.
So that's a huge philosophical argument about quantum mechanics. Niels Bohr, Werner Heisenberg, Paul Dirac, versus a kind of Einstein unified field theory. Stephen Hawking himself was an extension of that, but Einstein, a genius who was pursuing that. So you had two worldviews, right, coming at each other. The Naturwissenschaften, as the Germans say, the natural sciences, versus the Geisteswissenschaften. So Heidegger, right, in Dasein and ontology versus, right, and Goethe versus science over here and the way in which Einsteinian and Galilean and so on went on. Now, here's the point. I'm saying all that to say this. Is there a way, therefore, that we can unify, for all intents and purposes, the ways in which the world operates and being as honest as possible? Saying, no, when I go to science and study, it was a big bang, this happened on this time, this is how old the universe is. Versus a narrative, a biblical narrative that might dictate to some people, or another religious story about the origins of the universe. Well, those who are more sophisticated, perhaps even most sophisticated, might say, there's no essential tension between a conception of scientific rigor that acknowledges in truth, right? Dr. Williams was talking about earlier, in truth facticity, observed phenomenon, right? What the case is, the empirical. What does empirical mean? A big word that means what? That which can be falsified or verified through the senses. Touch, taste, feel, see, right? So the empirical as the predicate, right? Then gives us one standard, but the subatomic, what we can't see, but we can discern, right? Through a telescope, or what we see in time. When Einstein saw that time and space were bent, and the way in which that was done as a result of his theory, and then in a Byrne patent office when he was in his early 20s, the Anna Mirabilis, 1921, 5 basic theories of science: relativity, special theory of relativity, Brownian motion. The dude had a hell of a year. It's like LeBron in physics, bro. So, thing is that scientific rigor can acknowledge through our own understanding of the universe how it came into existence as how it did. The theological, the spiritual might answer something deeper than the how, the why. Because scientists, Einstein, Hawking, they ain't worried about why. They have no ontological meditation upon it, no epistemological verificationism that would determine the way in which knowledge operates for a particular purpose. So the why of it is different. So you can have a religiously inspired conception of purpose and destiny, as well as a conception of scientific rigor that says this is how it came about. Now, what about if they in a contrast? What about if they in conflict? What about if one on the religious book, the religious narrative, the specifically spiritual articulation suggests that it's trying to play science now? I don't think you reading the Bible for no scientific discourse, though, dog. When Galileo said, look, the sun, wait a minute, what you talking about, the sun and the moon, and which one is moving around the earth? Now, you can say that all day in the Bible, but bruh, we know which one it is. Now, oh my God, are you saying you got it wrong? I'm just saying don't worship the Bible, worship the God who gave you the Bible. I'm saying don't worship words written in a context, worship the one who gave you the words in a context. Because the secretary could have got it wrong. It ain't the divine inspiration, it's the secretary writing it down. Sometimes the secretary get it wrong. Sorry for those of you who want to not demythologize a hermeneutic in a Bootmanian sense of your biblical literalism. Sorry, dog. You ain't no biblical literalist. If thy right eye offend thee, cut it off. I ain't seen none of y'all doing that. So my point is understand that there are different genres within even biblical literature. Some of it is poetry. Some of it is, inspirational stuff. Some of it is gangster rap. The Psalms are gangster rap, right? I mean, come on. Kill my enemies, kill his mama too, then kill his dog, and then jack up his mother-in-law. But bless me, Lord, upon my your throne, because I'm trying to do the right thing. So after making falling back on that ass with a hellified gangster lean on the mic like an old batch of collard greens. It's the capital O-S-O, yes, and fresh and double O-P, D-O-double-G-Y-D-O-D-O-double-T-C, showing much flex when it's time to wreck a mic, pimping woes and glocking the grip like my name is Dolomite. I want to thank the Lord for this ability to stand up here and get this award. Wait a minute, hold on, right? Is there a fundamental tension between the articulation of a testosterone-centric conception of toxic masculinity and on high God? Yep, a little bit of tension going on there. So my point simply is that when we begin to reconcile scientific discourse, the paradigm of empirical, that which can be verified or falsified, conceptions of truth and knowledge, where we understand we are caught within the veil and within the seam of knowledge, and therefore we're not like Archimedes and standing outside with an Archimedean point of objectivity and neutrality. We are not with Leibniz, subspecie eternitatis. I love those Latin words. Seeing from the gaze of God, we down here with Wes Montgomery. Y'all don't know nothing about Wes Montgomery. Y'all don't know nothing about Wes Montgomery playing the jazz guitar with his song Down Here on the Ground. Y'all don't know nothing about that. Go look him up. Wes Montgomery. We are down with Wes Montgomery on the ground. We're not up with God above human history. We are implicated in the very thing we are studying. So when people try to resolve it, God said it, I believe it, that settles it. Slow down, homie. How you know? What you know for sure. That's why when Oprah is Descartes with a skirt. What do you know for sure? A Cartesian epistemology is what she's being driven by. It's all at the end of the day a projection of our particular understanding of the world into the universe. Have enough humility to acknowledge you could be wrong. Even Blaise Pascal said, just do a wager. It ain't gonna hurt you if you believe in God and it turn out not to be true. What you ain't wasting no time. You good. But if it turns out to be real, that God is real, bruh, you got a lot to gain. All right, you can do a ponce, je ponce. You can do some ponces on the Jansenist Christian, Catholic sense, or you can be an atheist, or you can be an agnostic, or you can be a human being in quest for knowledge, open to the possibility of the revelation of spirit in surprising fashion.
Mm.
At the end of the day, I think, yes, science has to be concerned with and governed by ethical and moral considerations. That's why when it comes to Black people in the Blacksination, Blacksination, get that black scene in your arm. What am I saying? Black people ain't afraid of science.
Mm.
We afraid of scientists.
Mm.
Ooh, Black folk ain't afraid of medicine. We're afraid of doctors.
Mm.
Because doctors have abused us, not medicine itself. Medicine can save you. The same sun that melts wax hardens clay.
Mm.
Depends on what agent is acting on and what material it's interacting with.
Mm.
And so, yes, to answer your question, I believe that the redemptive characteristic of scientific discourse is not for one moment to surrender its will and impulse toward as, quote, an objective consideration of the phenomena as it can generate. But at the same time, Thomas Kuhn said even scientific discourse has a paradigm shift.
Mm-hmm.
The way you understood the world 50 years ago, 100 years ago ain't the same. That's why they keep making new discoveries. That's why people keep winning Nobel Prizes. Oh, first we thought it was subatomic particles, then it's quarks, then it's black holes. What the hell is it?
Mm.
So have enough humility to go, I don't know. Even if you're a scientist, you don't know. Have enough humility, both as a priest and as a paleontologist.
Mm.
Acknowledge what Pierre Teilhard de Chardin said in terms of both science and faith.
Mm.
All right.
Oh, thank you so much.
God bless you, my friend.
I hope that the community that has assembled has been witness to Dr. Dyson's genius. And if you don't know, then now you know that the reason for inviting him into this particular conversation is because of this particular moment where we are left overwhelmed, awash with his brilliance. So, brother, thank you so much. Send my love to your dear wife who made this possible. The Garrison Institute is your second, third, fourth home when we are back to normal.
With y'all again soon, man. Let's do it. Let's do it. Thank y'all for this opportunity. Dr. Acosta, what a wonderful, brilliant, gifted young man you are. Thank you for this opportunity and all the wonderful people on here too, my man.
Yes, yes, yes. You take good care.
God bless y'all now. We'll be in contact.
Yes.
Doc
Yes.
King. All right, Doc. All right, God bless y'all.